Is the end near? Yes. Episode over. Quickest one yet. Seriously, the overwhelming message of the Bible is that the end is near. Read the words of Jesus and hear him say, "Be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect." Read the authors of the New Testament and hear them say things like, "The end is near," or "The end of all things is at hand," or "The coming of the Lord is at hand," or "Children, it is the last hour." Or at the very end of the Bible, the risen Christ says, "Behold, I am coming soon." My goodness, even read the Old Testament and hear the prophets say over and over that the great day of the Lord is near. You know, few things are as clear in the Bible as the imminence, the nearness of the end of the world as we know it. I think for many of us, we crave something a little bit more than to simply know that the Lord could return at any hour. We want a structured timeline to track the unfolding of events. Which chapter of Revelation are we on today, we might ask? And the Bible doesn't give as much of that as I think we want it to. Too often we read Revelation with our newspapers in our hand instead of the Old Testament. But here's the biblical paradox about the end. If you really want to look forward and understand the future, you must look back and understand the past. All throughout the Bible, God's redemption follows certain patterns that interweave like threads throughout the story of Scripture. Or to use another analogy, the book of Revelation is like a surround sound system with each speaker emitting slightly different Old Testament tones, which together presents a vivid soundtrack of redemption that enables us to really feel it in all of its cinematic, salvific glory. The book of Revelation is less of a timeline and more of a tapestry. No other book of the Bible evokes the Old Testament more readily and frequently than John's Apocalypse. Time would fail to speak of how Christ is presented as the Passover lamb from the days of the Exodus, or how the trumpet and bowl judgments echo the plagues poured out on Egypt with the blood, frogs, darkness, and sores, or the description of God's people as a royal priesthood directly hearkening back to Mount Sinai, or God's redeemed people standing by the glassy sea singing a new song of Moses, or the language of a new Jerusalem coming down from heaven, and how the new heavens and new earth are portrayed in garden temple imagery, deeply reminiscent of Eden, blooming with life. All of this past imagery paints a vivid picture of future victory in the midst of present persecution and suffering. And what a tragedy if we miss the forest for all the apocalyptic trees. You know, the message of Revelation is relatively simple. God is sovereign, and we win with Christ. So press on and endure in present suffering. Throughout the book, we hear the refrain, "Here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints." The overwhelming message of the Bible is that the end is near. So we must be ready. Immediately after talking about his own return, about how nobody knows the hour, Jesus tells a parable, an everyday life story with a deeper spiritual meaning about 10 virgins. Maybe today we would call them bridesmaids. And they have 10 lamps. They are eagerly anticipating the return of the bridegroom, who represents Christ himself. Jesus warns how 5 were foolish and took no extra oil for their lamps. And when the bridegroom took a little longer to arrive than they expected, everybody fell asleep. But at midnight, they heard the cries, "Here's the bridegroom! Come out to meet him!" The wise were ready, for they had extra oil, but the foolish didn't, and they scramble too late and are shut out to the marriage feast. And when they knock on the closed door, they hear the words, "Truly I say to you, I do not know you." The problem isn't that the foolish virgins rejected the bridegroom. The problem was that they weren't prepared for the wait. In fact, the foolish and the wise virgins look identical for almost all of the story. All of them eagerly await his return. All get tired and all fall asleep. The only difference shows up at the moment of testing. Only some are truly ready. Friends, if the Bible spoke of the last days, we are certainly in the last hours of the last days. Are you ready? What would you do differently if you knew the Lord were going to return today? Would you forsake some beloved sin? Would you put your faith in Jesus for salvation? Don't delay. Let's be ready for the return of the bridegroom so that when he returns, he comes for you and for me, as we are part of the collective bride, the church. There's still time and there's still room at the table.